You're listening to a production of the National Media Archive. To learn more or volunteer, go to nationalmediaarchive.com.
When most people hear the word fame, they imagine someone getting attention or recognition for being genuinely skilled in one way or another. A brilliant actor, an above-average singer, a talented lyricist, all examples of why someone might earn millions of dollars every year and be adored by the public and their peers alike. Even celebrities who seem famous just for being famous usually have a skill, one that keeps the spotlight on them and turns that spotlight into profit. Usually when we talk about celebrities, they're celebrated for what they can do, but over time they lose touch with any sense of normal life. They feel above regular people and start to believe the rules don't apply to them. But the truth is, that's not always how it works out. Today's story isn't about a movie star or a pop icon who thought they were untouchable because of their talent. This is the story of someone who made millions and gained fame by simply eating a sandwich every day. That's it, a man whose entire claim to fame rested on one very unusual habit that turned into a nationwide marketing campaign. Imagine being asked to testify about your body and how it changed because you swapped your routine for turkey subs and veggie delights. That was Jared's life, answering questions about sandwiches and nodding along while the world turned him into a mascot. Jared Fogle, more commonly known as Subway Jared, was a household name for a while, a symbol of an idea people wanted to believe that losing weight could be as simple as ordering the right fast food. His story spread like wildfire. He was everywhere: commercials, interviews, photos of him holding up his old jeans to show how big he used to be. But before all that, before the fame and the scandal, Jared was just a kid with an appetite for two things: video games and food. Jared was born on August 23, 1977 in Indianapolis, Indiana. He grew up a good-natured kid, well-liked, with no sign of what was coming. Early on, he got hooked on video games. Every day after school, he'd rush through homework and skip family time just to park himself in front of the TV for hours. And when he sat down to play, he always made sure he had enough snacks to keep him glued to the screen. Bags of chips, boxes of cereal, piles of sweets, and a mountain of soda cans. He didn't think about it, it was just what he did. The games were the main event, but the snacks were the background noise that kept him company. By the time he reached 19 and enrolled at Indiana University Bloomington, Jared weighed around 425 pounds. He was putting away an average of 15 cans of soda a day, along with thousands upon thousands of calories in junk food. Walking across campus became a battle. He'd leave early for class because he needed extra time to catch his breath. Walking with friends was embarrassing. He'd always ask them to slow down so he could keep up. Staying awake was hard too. He struggled with sleep apnea, which meant he never got the rest he needed. Exhaustion clung to him like a heavy coat he couldn't take off. One day that exhaustion caught up to him in the worst way possible. Jared fell asleep at the wheel while driving back to campus and crashed his car into a tree. It was a wake-up call in every sense. That crash didn't just dent metal, it forced Jared to face the reality that his weight had spiraled so far out of control that it could have killed him or worse, someone else. So he made a decision. He was going to change. He promised himself that when the new year rolled around, he'd lose the weight. And unlike most New Year's resolutions, he actually stuck to it. But his plan wasn't exactly doctor-proved. Jared didn't follow a balanced meal plan or consult a nutritionist. He came up with something on his own. He decided he'd eat only Subway sandwiches, one small turkey sub for lunch, a bigger veggie sub for dinner, a bag of baked chips, and a diet soda. That was it. The reason was simple: there was a Subway just steps away from where he lived on campus, and he didn't want to walk any farther than he had to. It worked in its own strange way. He went from consuming 10,000 calories a day to just a tiny fraction of that. Sure, any extreme calorie deficit will shed pounds fast, but the way he did it could have caused real damage to his body over time. Still, Jared didn't care about that. The pounds were dropping, people were noticing, and he didn't look back. Word about Jared's sandwich diet started to spread when his roommate wrote an article about it for their college paper. In just 1 year, Jared shrank from 425 to 180. His old friends barely recognized him. He talked about how losing the weight had changed everything: simple things, like walking across campus without sweating through his shirt or needing to catch his breath every few minutes. The article landed on the front page of the Indiana Daily Student because it was such a spectacle. A college kid, eating fast food every day, losing nearly half his body weight. People couldn't help but stare. And that's when fate stepped in. A writer at Men's Health magazine, who just so happened to be working on a story about weird diets that actually worked, stumbled onto Jared's story. He didn't even have time to talk to Jared before publishing it. He just included the story, changing Jared's name to James. But that one mention was all it took to launch Jared into the national spotlight. Subway saw the article and knew they had stumbled onto something huge. They reached out to Jared and asked him to be part of their advertising. He thought he'd maybe star in a few local ads, nothing big. He had no idea what was coming. On January 1, 2000, Jared appeared in his first Subway commercial. The message was clear: if Jared could lose that much weight just by swapping burgers for subs, anyone could. People believed it. They lined up at Subway stores convinced they'd found a miracle, a diet they didn't have to think about. Just order the sandwich, eat it, and the pounds would melt away. But what people didn't understand was that Jared wasn't proof that fast food was suddenly healthy. He was proof that if you eat way less than you normally do, your body will lose weight no matter what's on the menu. Subway didn't care about the fine print. They saw sales explode, and they knew they had to keep Jared front and center. And Jared, he was just an average-looking guy, not a celebrity athlete or a glamorous movie star. He looked like the neighbor next door, approachable, trustworthy, believable. People related to him. That's what made the ad so powerful. He wasn't pitching sandwiches like a paid spokesperson. He was selling an idea that if he could do it, so could you. Subway jumped on the chance to lock him down. They offered him a deal that would pay him more than $1 million a year to keep telling his story. He'd do ads, public appearances, ribbon cuttings, grand openings, anywhere Subway needed him. Jared would show up with his big old jeans and a smile. And he did. He was young, fresh out of college, and suddenly very rich. He knew the ride wouldn't last forever, so he made the most of it. Part of Jared's appeal was that he never pretended to be a fitness expert. He wasn't an athlete or a doctor. He was just a guy who had dropped a ton of weight and kept it off. People loved that. He even joked in interviews that he was just trying to enjoy it while it lasted, knowing deep down that the fame would eventually fade. But while Jared was playing the everyman on TV, another side of him was already starting to show, one that had nothing to do with sandwiches or success. It was a side that would eventually bring everything crashing down. By the time Jared's face was everywhere, he had become one of the most recognized spokespeople in modern marketing. He wasn't just selling sandwiches, he was selling hope, a shortcut, the fantasy that anyone could transform their life just by copying what he did. But behind the camera, while people pictured him as the harmless guy with the big pants, Jared was building a very different life, one hidden in plain sight. When Subway first struck gold with Jared's story, they didn't just film a few ads, they turned him into a traveling symbol. Jared went on tour. He visited new Subway store openings, spoke at schools, threw out first pitches at baseball games. In photos, he'd stand there smiling wide, holding up those massive old jeans as proof of what he'd done. Crowds loved it. Kids especially thought it was cool. To them, he was a celebrity, not a singer or an athlete, but a real person they could meet in the hallway of their school gym. To keep this going, Jared set up the Jared Foundation. On paper, it looked like a noble cause, a non-profit meant to raise awareness about childhood obesity and promote healthy habits. He'd show up at middle schools with his old jeans, tell kids how he used to be just like them but bigger, and how if he could lose the weight, so could they. He'd sign autographs, pose for photos, hang out in classrooms and cafeterias, acting like everyone's big brother. Parents and teachers trusted him because he wasn't a stranger. He was that friendly face they'd seen on TV every day. But the Jared Foundation wasn't what it appeared to be. Behind all the photo ops and pep talks, the charity was just another way for Jared to pocket money while avoiding taxes. Schools and local sponsors would write checks to the foundation for his speaking fees. He'd cash them in and funnel the money back to himself. It's not an uncommon trick among celebrities. When you hear about famous people opening their own charities, sometimes the main goal isn't the charity at all but the loopholes that come with it. Jared wasn't satisfied with just the attention. Fame brought him money, and money made him reckless. Out on the road for years at a time, he began to live a double life. On stage or in the school gym, he was the wholesome weight loss hero. After dark, he was a man who treated loyalty like a joke. He stepped out on his first wife constantly. Rumors about him spending nights with escorts and strangers in hotel rooms started swirling, but no one really wanted to look too closely. He was Jared, the Subway guy, surely harmless. Those who worked close to him started to notice. Behind the friendly smile, there was something colder, more controlling. His first wife saw it up close. At home, Jared's mood could flip fast. In public, he'd embarrass her. In private, he'd berate her. She filed for divorce not just to get away from the lies, but because she was afraid. The restraining order she filed hinted at a man who needed power over people, someone who liked to push boundaries and see who would stop him. The public never saw that version. They saw the commercials, the fresh sandwiches, the big jeans, and they kept believing. After his first marriage fell apart, Jared kept up appearances. He started dating again, settled into another relationship that looked stable from the outside. He married Kathleen McLaughlin, a teacher, the kind of partner who made him look safe and normal again. Kathleen bought into the image. She saw the good man in the commercials, the guy who talked about healthy kids, not the man behind the curtain. She didn't know about the trail of affairs that never really stopped. Jared was clever about keeping different sides of himself hidden, at least from people who didn't want to look too closely. While Jared's face stayed on billboards and TV spots, he expanded his little empire behind the scenes. He surrounded himself with people who wouldn't question his secrets. That's how Russell Taylor entered the picture. Taylor started out helping Jared with speeches. One day Jared needed help writing a talk for an event. Russell stepped in, and suddenly he was part of the inner circle. He became Jared's shadow, traveling with him everywhere. They claimed they were on a mission to help kids eat better and stay active. But behind closed doors, they were living it up in ways that would make most people's stomachs turn. Russell wasn't just an employee, he was Jared's right hand, his fixer, his cleanup crew when things got messy. He took care of everything, no questions asked. He set up events, handled logistics, and did whatever Jared needed to keep the show running. Together, they turned the Jared Foundation into their playground, using the money meant for kids to fund their trips, their private indulgences, their secrets. During the day, they were role models for healthy living. At night, they slipped into clubs and casinos, living out fantasies they hid behind the wholesome mask. Russell's personal life was just as tangled. He and his wife had an open marriage which only made things easier for him to say yes to anything Jared asked. The pair weren't just bending rules, they were breaking them in ways that crossed into the unthinkable. Russell wired his home with hidden cameras, supposedly for security. He told himself he needed them to catch a thief. But what he really caught was something far worse, moments that should have never been seen, and children who never should have been anywhere near him or Jared. At first it looked like an accident. One of those cameras recorded something it shouldn't have, but instead of shutting it down, Jared wanted more. He wanted Russell to keep recording. He wanted images he could watch later. It became an arrangement, one that twisted the original lie of the Jared Foundation into something rotten at its core. Jared found pleasure in the power, controlling Russell, controlling what they did, pushing him to do worse and worse. And Russell went along, as if each new step over the line somehow made sense to him. What started with hidden cameras turned into a machine. Russell arranged sleepovers, parties, setups where kids would stay in rooms they thought were safe. The cameras stayed hidden, rolling silently, capturing everything. Jared's sick appetite fed on it. And every time they pushed further, the trust people had in Jared's face, the man with the big jeans and the subway smile, kept the questions away. While this was happening, Jared kept up the same routine. Commercials, school tour, smiling photos with kids whose parents had no idea who they were really handing them over to. Even when some people tried to sound the alarm, it wasn't enough. Rochelle Herman-Walrand, a radio host who got close to Jared, started to notice cracks in his facade. He made strange comments about middle school girls that made her skin crawl. When she went to the police, she was told nothing could be done. He hadn't broken any laws, they said. There was no crime in being creepy. So Rochelle did what she thought she had to do. She pretended to be interested in his twisted confessions. She kept talking, kept him comfortable, kept him bragging, and she recorded it all. Phone calls, texts, the darkest things he would admit when he thought he could trust her. She took it to the FBI, convinced that proof would finally bring him down. But time after time, she was told it wasn't enough. Words weren't actions, they said. They needed more. And Jared, protected by that mask of the everyman, kept going. Even as Rochelle gathered mountains of evidence, the system seemed blind to what she was handing over. She kept talking to Jared, kept recording his sick fantasies, hoping that one day the words would finally be too clear to ignore. But the more she fed him rope, the more he showed what he really was, not just a man with shameful secrets, but someone who felt untouchable. He'd talk about children the way other people talk about dinner plans, describing in sick detail what he wanted, what he'd done, what he planned to do next. And each time Rochelle hung up, she felt like poison was seeping into her own life. She'd sit alone in the dark, shaking, trying to make sense of why no one would help stop him. While Rochelle fought her lonely battle, Jared's public life kept rolling forward like nothing was wrong. He posed for more photos, he gave more talks, he stood in gymnasiums smiling at kids and teachers and parents who never imagined the real reason he was there. And in the shadows, Russell Taylor kept delivering what Jared demanded. Russell had hidden cameras everywhere, in his own house, in alarm clocks, in rooms where children thought they were safe. He told himself this was normal now. That's what Jared wanted, and Russell was desperate to please the man who paid his bills, owned his house, and whispered sick orders into his ear. Russell's twisted appetite didn't stop at what Jared asked for. He fed his own darkness, mixing child exploitation with other crimes too vile to easily describe. He filmed things that should have never happened, kids, animals, acts that made seasoned detectives sick when they finally saw the files. He'd stash these recordings away like trophies, hidden behind fake security footage labels. And all the while, Jared kept encouraging him, keep it coming, find more, don't stop. Eventually, the walls started to close in, not because of Rochelle's years of warnings, those were still gathering dust, but because Russell Taylor got sloppy. A woman who knew Russell, someone he thought he could trust, came forward after he crossed a line with her too. She told police about the vile messages he'd sent, the photos, the videos, the dark fantasies about children and animals. It sounded unbelievable at first, but when the police raided Russell's house, they found everything. Thousands of images, hours of footage, proof that this was no rumor. And tucked inside those files were the links back to Jared, messages showing what Jared asked for, videos Russell made just for him, emails where Jared thanked him for getting Daddy his fix. Suddenly, the nice guy in the subway ad was stripped away. There was only the predator underneath, staring back at everyone who'd believed his lie for so long. Once investigators realized what they were holding, they moved fast. They searched Jared's house. On his laptop they found more child abuse material, some filmed by Russell, some bought on the dark web, some so graphic that seasoned agents needed to step away from their desks to breathe. On his phone they found messages about how Jared used his trips to sleep with minors in different cities. He'd pay women to find him underage kids, boys and girls. He didn't care. The younger, the better. That was the part he liked most. And for years, he'd gotten away with it because he wrapped himself in the soft fabric of trust. A harmless guy with a sandwich. When Jared's arrest finally made headlines, it was like the country couldn't process it. This was the man who told kids to stay healthy, who smiled on late-night shows, who posed with his giant pants like a trophy. Now he was being dragged into court for the ugliest crimes imaginable. People asked the obvious questions: who knew? Who looked away? Who helped him keep this secret while kids suffered? Plenty of people had hints. Rochelle knew, and she tried to stop it. Cindy Mills, a Subway franchise owner Jared slept with, told corporate she was terrified. She showed them messages where Jared bragged about paying $100 for a 16-year-old girl about wanting to sleep with her underage cousin. Corporate shrugged it off. He's dating someone stable now, they said. He'll settle down, keep it quiet. Subway made millions off Jared. He was too valuable to question. And when he finally fell, they did what corporations always do: they distanced themselves, released a bland statement, and pretended they never saw it coming. But in the quiet corners of old emails and ignored complaints, there were signs. There always are. When Jared faced the judge, he tried to put on the same show he'd used for years. He cried, he said he was sorry. He talked about learning from his mistakes, wanting to do better, wanting to change, but the judge didn't buy it. The evidence spoke louder than his tears. He was sentenced to 15 years behind bars. No cameras, no commercials, no big pants to hide behind. You'd think that would be the end of it, that prison would be the final stop for someone like Jared. But prison wasn't the punishment people expected. Apart from one brutal beating when he first arrived, Jared settled in like nothing much had changed. He kept losing weight now from running laps in the yard every day. He bragged in letters about how healthy he felt, how he'd found a routine. He read books, watched football, wrote cheerful notes about missing carpet and silverware. And when reporters asked how he was holding up, he claimed he was doing fine, better than fine, actually. No mention of the kids whose lives he helped ruin. No sign he really understood the price of his crimes. Some women on the outside still wrote to him, flirted with him, played along. He called them from the prison phones, asked for explicit photos, gave them instructions about what he wanted. It was like the lesson never sank in. Strip away the ads, the foundation, the sandwich shop tour, and you were left with the same man he always was. When his second wife learned the truth, she left him. She said she never saw it coming. She sued Subway, saying the company knew who Jared really was but let him near kids anyway. She wanted them to admit their part, how they looked away when money was rolling in. Subway's lawyers fought her, of course. Companies rarely apologize when the cash flows good. In the end, Jared sits in a cell, counting the days until he might get out. The earliest possible release is 2029 if he gets every break. By then, the world will have changed. But whether he changes, that's harder to believe. Some people carry the same sickness inside them no matter where they live, no matter how many locks and walls stand between them and the world outside. It's easy to remember the ads, the smiling man, the promise that a sandwich could fix everything. But the real story isn't about losing weight. It's about how easy it is to trust a lie when it's wrapped in something familiar. Jared didn't invent that, he just made himself the perfect salesman for it.